And our lead this hour comes from Brooklyn. Now, the main reason that I got suckered in to watching this NBA game, Kevin Durant and the Nets versus Steph Curry and the Warriors, was not because I particularly care about the Brooklyn Nets or the Golden State Warriors, but instead I like watching the Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Shaquille O'Neal and Ernie Johnson and those guys playing grab ass on TV. I enjoy that. So I started out watching that, and then I just kept watching the game, and there wasn't much else on, so I just stayed with it, and I ended up watching the game. It was a terrible game. We watched so you would not have to. That's the way I look at it. Steph Curry had 37 points, 9 3-pointers, 9 of 14 from downtown, and Andrew Wiggins picked up off the scrap heap from Minnesota, had 19. Golden State cut down the Nets. An 18-point regular season road win. Okay, fine. It's mid-November. Who the hell cares? Warriors led by as many as 28 points. So they're 12-2 on the season. Brooklyn drops to 10-5. Now, the Bay Area Ballers did not trail in the second half of that game. They coasted along. But the better story is in the losing locker room. And Brooklyn is one of the glam teams. And so anytime stuff happens that goes sideways for a glam team, it's a lot of fun to talk about, right? The losing locker room story is always the better story. So Steve Nash had some interesting things to say. Now, Steve Nash, the relatively new NBA coach, just kind of hanging out, doing his thing, whatever, replaced Mike D'Antoni in Brooklyn. Nobody really thinks of him as the actual coach. He's just kind of there hanging out, and he talks to the media. But Steve Nash, representing the Nets, talked about a number of things. But the one soundbite, which is the money soundbite, the coach of Brooklyn was asked if he's worried that the Nets have not been able to match up the tail of the tape with the top teams early in the NBA season. So that was the question. Are you concerned by your team's performance against teams like the Warriors and the other top teams in the NBA early on? And as Warner Wolf would say, let's go to the audio tape. Here's what Steve Nash said.
I just don't think we're in that category yet. We got a lot of work to do. We're trying to, improve as a group, get better. Hopefully we can find a way to overcome some of our deficiencies by the end of the year. I think the guys have been great as far as buying into what we want to do defensively. No one would have picked us as a top 10 defense to start the year. We're defending. We're finding a way. I think offensively, we have all these different lineups, different background styles of play, 10 new players on our team. It takes time. We started the year with a continuity plan from last year that got thrown out the window, obviously, when Kai didn't come back. So we're trying to build and figure it out. And when you play a really good defense, it really tests you. And I think tonight it was a great lesson for us that we got to double down on some of our principles when the going gets tough.
Oh, when the going gets tough. That's a good sports cliche. All right, so let us discuss how much trouble are the Nets in at this point. Still early in the season. Most people don't start paying attention until Christmas. On the patented MALLER scale of panic, 1 to 10, with 10 being unspeakable dismay. Let's answer that question. So on the MALLER scale of panic, I am at a 7. You're saying, it's too early to be at a 7. It can only be a 6. It's too early. No, I'm at a 7. It's my scale of panic. It's the MALLER scale of panic. And I say it's a 7 for Brooklyn. So my take, you've got Paper, Ghost, and Tibbs tips. And we'll scratch all of this together into a MALLER model line. Now, tip-off. Steve Nash began honestly. I believe that. He began honestly when he said the Nets aren't a heavyweight. Those are my choice of words, not his, but that's essentially what he implied, right? And I think most of us know that he's not really a coach in the sense of a traditional coach, that he's an ambassador, Steve Nash of the Nets, a figurehead. He's along for the ride, and he's not the one driving the bus. Right now, that would be a struggle bus against the better teams. Now, Nash, in the soundbite we just played, parsing his words, he suggested that the changes that were made are a factor and all that stuff, and that they made too many changes. Well, Golden State made a bunch of roster changes also. They don't seem to be having any problems over there. They still have players that are out injured. I have not seen, watching the Nets, and I've seen them a few times. They're on national TV quite a bit. And I have seen the Nets several times, and I have yet to see the wow factor. I haven't seen it. maybe it's happened, but I haven't seen it when they played better teams. When I've watched Brooklyn, I've seen them feast on cream puffs, and they're really good at that. But when they play the heavy hitters, and the heavy hitters come back and they counterpunch, the Nets get into the fetal position. They're like a paper tiger. And so you are judged by how you do overall, but you're also judged by how you do against the elite teams, the upper crust of the NBA. And right now, the Nets have only played 6 games against teams that are at 500 or better. They have gone 2-4 in those 6 games. So they're off to a rocky start, and they've often been pantsed when playing the top teams. And so those are the measuring sticks that you look at, and Brooklyn does not measure up. Now, furthermore, the Kyrie Irving excuse keeps popping up from the bottom of the deck. So I'm not buying that as an excuse. I know Kyrie hasn't played because of the lawmakers in New York and the mandates that they have put in for the vaccine, but just think of Kyrie out for the year with a knee injury. He wasn't injured on the court. He was injured by the political class in New York that won't allow him to play basketball. So I don't have any empathy here. You still have Kevin Durant. You've got James Harden above the marquee. They've added LaMarcus Aldridge came back, and he had stepped away. Bruce Bowen's there. Patty Mills. These are good role players. Blake Griffin settled in to be an auxiliary player. And guess what? That's more than enough to compete against the upper teams in the NBA when you have Durant as the centerpiece. The story here, though, has been not only do you have the exit stage right of Kyrie, as his season's certainly on the endangered list, depending on things changing rapidly in with the lawmakers, but you also have the ghost of the beard, James Harden. You talk about someone who's moving down, not moving up. The escalator's going down, it's not going up. The stats have collapsed. Points, assists, rebounds, all of them worse this season than years past. Turnovers are up, and away. And his cheat code, the thing that made him elite, baiting officials into blowing the whistle for cheap foul calls. While lately Harden has been able to get a few more foul shots, he certainly had a fair amount in the game in garbage time against Golden State. It is not the same product. The beard also looks to be lethargic. Like the numbers are only down slightly. There's not a massive decline in the numbers, just a little bit. But the efficiency has not been there, and he just looks a little slow. Looks a wee bit slow. All right, last thing here. So Steve Nash, I want to circle back to Steve Nash, the ambassador of what is not a well-oiled machine right now. It's a little rusty there. The Nets, he had a rambling answer. He had several sports cliches. Lots of work to do, trying to improve, get better. Those are all some of the cliches. Have to overcome deficiency. The guys are buying in. I said that. And then he pivoted from that bag o' cliches to a full sob story. Steve Nash, the ambassador, de facto faux coach of the Nets, talked about 10 new players on the team, and it takes time. And he lamented the fact that the continuity plan of the Nets from last year got thrown out the window because Kyrie is not playing, yada, 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 trying to build and figure it out. That last part is all crapola. Now, I prefer Tibbs tips. So remember the great soundbite, we played it last week, Tom Thibodeau, the coach across the borough, the other borough in Manhattan there. Tom Thibodeau was asked last week when the Knicks got off to a slow start, and the media said they need 20 games to gel. And then Tom Thibodeau went on a rant. He said, well, you get to 20 and you need 30. And then you get to 30 and people say you got to get to 40. And as he pointed out, before you know it, the season's over. So it's a bunch of malarkey is what it is. And the mindset, it's like the Nets, I get it. They figure as long as they just make the playoffs, and they're a playoff team right now in the East, it doesn't matter. They don't need all the pomp and circumstance. They're just going through the motions during the regular season. But there's a thing called bad habits, and you build up the bad habits, and it's hard to change those bad habits once the playoffs come around and you're only playing good teams. And it's not a case where you can just roll the ball out because you have Kevin Durant and you've got James Harden, and you're like, all right, here we go. We're good to go. It's not like that.